8 o'clock, Wednesday evening. Welcome to our streaming time for Tropical Storm Erin. Hi, everybody. I'm 10 Tampa Bay Chief Meteorologist Bobby Deskins. I'm joined this weekend and every night this week, really, with Ross. You're up in I'm always getting these back and forth confused, right? Ross Moonwell's up in Jacksonville, WLTV. TLV. I knew that's what it was because Efren Afante's up in Columbia. He's at WLTX. That's what I was doing wrong. Welcome, gentlemen. Right. Good to see you this evening. We have a couple changes out there today with the storm, huh? Did you see the 5 o'clock numbers?
Interesting.
Yeah, started to grow a little bit stronger here. 50-mile-per-hour winds now with Erin.
Pressure dropped a little bit too. We've been here every night this week. I've been used to saying 45-mile-per-hour winds and moving to the west at like 20 or something. But now it's starting to change, and every day this week that we've been talking about, one of the things we've showed you is that warmer water. We're going to show you there. It's getting to that now. Now, let's take a look at the big picture. We'll start there. We actually have another wave to watch, believe it or not. We're not really concerned about this one, but it's actually over the Yucatan. It was in the Western Caribbean. You can see it at the lower left-hand side of your screen right there. That is Invest 98L. That is going to be tracking off towards the north and the west, and we'll touch briefly on that. But let's get into Tropical Storm Erin. It's 2,400 miles east-southeast of the state of Florida. Georgia's even a little bit more than that, so it's way out there. Although now it is about 900 miles east of Barbados, so it's closing in pretty quickly. Notice the top of your screen here where all the data is. It's at 50 miles per hour, the winds, and that's what's changed. That's been 45 miles per hour for the last 2 or 3 days. It's been over this cooler water, but now it's getting to some warmer water and it's starting to look a little bit better. The pressure has come down. It's 1,001 millibars and is moving to the west at 17 miles per hour. Speaking of data, the hurricane hunters are flying in. In fact, the Keesler Air Force Base, they have sent their planes. Their C-130s are down there now. They actually went down to Puerto Rico. They're staging because tomorrow, I think by 0Z, which is by 8 p.m., they're going to be flying into the storm. And also the NOAA hurricane hunters that are out of Lakeland, Florida, they are heading in that direction. I think they're going to be staging down in Bridgeton, Barbados. So they're on their way down there right now. Tomorrow, this time, they will be out in the storm, and they will continue to go one plane after the other, and we will get much more data. And that data is going to go into the forecast models. So here is the latest track as of 5 o'clock. You can see it's moving to the west-northwest, well, west, I would say, but then eventually to the west-northwest. But the key here is look at all this strengthening. By tomorrow afternoon, we're looking at 65-mile-per-hour winds. By tomorrow night into early Friday morning, we have our first hurricane of the season on our hands. 75-mile-per-hour winds, and then it starts to continue to go all the way up. Cat 3 by Sunday afternoon with 115-mile-per-hour winds. Where is it going, guys? That is going to be the key here. You see the forecast from the Hurricane Center does have it recurving, mainly staying east of the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas and north of the islands. But Ross, where do you think, or who's doing this one, guys? Where do we think this thing is going to go? Because things have changed a little bit with this hurricane model, the European version of it today.
Bob, you know, the interesting thing about the changes that we have had is that there's 3 functions of where this is steering to that we're looking at. We know that it's going to be heading along the skirts of the Lesser and Greely Antilles, but that's going to be the big thing. It's like, where is it actually going? Let's take a look at that. Now, we're looking at, IFB is just popping up, but take a look. We're moving where it's moving towards the Caribbean, and then eventually it's going to take that skirt towards the north. Now, this European model is indicating that as it turns towards the north, there's 2 big features that we're watching. That big Bermuda high that's now actually translated a little bit further east into the Atlantic. But then we talked about, over the last 2 days, a very broad area of high pressure that's over the eastern portions of the U.S. What's the big thing about that is we're looking at that is going to be a very big influence to the trajectory of Erin moving to the west and affecting the areas of the southeast Atlantic. So you got those 2 areas of high pressure, it's going to travel right in between it. And right now, even though the guidance models from the National Hurricane Center don't have it that far out, you're still talking about high pressure that is going to influence where Erin is going to go. At this point right now, we have model guidance that suggests that that could be the escape route, going in between the two highs, and that's going to give an opportunity for Erin to steer away from the southeast Atlantic coastline, even past into the mid-Atlantic. But that high progresses further north.
Yeah,
so now it gives way for the European model, showing that now Erin gets in towards the Outer Banks.
Yeah, Efren, I just advanced that for you there. That high, that Bermuda high, according to the latest run of the European, it starts to build back to the west. And you literally can see how it's pushing on it right here, pushing it to the west. Now, this is just a model run, and this may flip-flop and come back, but wow. Efren, can you imagine? I mean, you're there in South Carolina. This is getting closer and closer to home there.
It is, and here's the big factor. This may not be a landfall to the Carolinas or Georgia. It'll get close, but the thing is that we are going to be dealing with wind. We're going to be dealing with possibly rain, but the wind is going to be affecting the waters, and we'll see that in a little while. But so we may not have bad weather, so to speak. Again, we're going to be possibly on the left side of the track. The left side is a little bit better as far as the significant weather than to the right. This model, this is coming in and suggesting that at least the group of models is that by the time we get into Saturday evening, it's going to be well north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. But this is where some of the models deviate a little bit. But you're still talking about at least a consistency through Saturday, and that as we get into Tuesday, well, all the way through the end of the evolution, a lot of these models, these are the American models, indicating that it is a dramatic shift to the right as far as where the trajectory is. So you're talking far, far away from the Southeast Atlantic. We may not be getting as much of an impact, but now you're talking about Bermuda that may be taking a direct impact.
And so now I want to show you the comparison, Efren. This is the GFS model and the European model. So what we're going to show you is both of them kind of overlaid at the same time, right? These are the single runs of it, right? And so that is not everything that those models are putting out. And we're going to show you some other data, the ensemble data coming up here. But notice the difference, the green that you see there, that is the European. You can see the difference between these two. I mean, they're about 300 miles apart by the time we get towards a week from today. All right, so that's quite a bit. And then notice as we get towards a week from tomorrow, there's the big difference, right? This was the run that came out this morning. The European put it right up there along the coast. And then you can see the GFS is out here, back out towards Bermuda a little bit. So this is just a model run. We will get another one later tonight. This does not mean that that is going to happen. And that's why we've been on every night at 8 o'clock to update you guys on what the current look is, because we know all this is going to change. Let's talk a little bit about the surface winds. Ross, obviously it's going to make a difference where it goes, right? But it's all kind of the same skirting things, right? How much wind people get will fluctuate just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If it takes a little bit more of a southerly track initially as it moves closer to the British and U.S. Virgin Islands and even the north sides of Puerto Rico, certainly the closer it is, the stronger wind gusts they're going to see. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised and almost expect the National Hurricane Center to start putting out some of those, tropical storm watches and or warnings. By the time we get to Thursday and Friday, we'll watch to see if the hurricane warnings get put out for some of those locations. I'm not sure if they'll necessarily receive hurricane, force winds there, but certainly if the Euro plays out like it's showing here, can't necessarily rule that out of the question. Similarly for the, the eastern sides of the Bahamas, and locally, for the folks in and around Jacksonville and southeast Georgia who are watching the stream right now, even in this scenario, if it does take a little bit more of a westerly track as it makes that turn to the north and northwest, for most of us, we're still only expecting winds anywhere from about 10 to 15 miles per hour, locally here in Jacksonville and in, coastal Georgia. Now, our beaches could see some wind gusts of 20 to 30 miles per hour. But I think really the bigger wind threat, if it takes that more westerly track, is really going to be, much closer to Efren's area, up there pretty much from, I would say, Myrtle Beach to Wilmington, up to Cape Hatteras and the Outer Banks. By the time we get to the middle of next week, I mean, they could be dealing with some significant wind gusts up there, perhaps, damaging that we could see some of those, at least at a minimum. Tropical storm watches or warnings issued for coastal portions of the Carolinas. But again, that's just what the European model is showing. If we go with the American GFS, it keeps a little bit further eastward, keeps that Bermuda high a little bit weaker, or at least just further off to the east. Then Bermuda's dealing more so with the extreme, dangerous, life-threatening winds, and most of the eastern seaboard doesn't have to necessarily deal with it. But if it takes that westerly track, as the European is showing, the Carolinas certainly going to take a blow. And I saw you pan back there earlier, Bobby, with portions of the Mid-Atlantic, New England states. Montauk, Long Island, and the New England, even up towards Nova Scotia, could be dealing with some pretty rough weather, some rough waves as well through the end of the week.
Yeah, and I think the key point here is that this is just a single run of the model, right? I mean, we showed you the European that if you're living on the East Coast, especially the Carolinas, you're like, whoa, right? But if you look at the GFS, you're like, oh, okay, we're fine. That's how modeling works. Those are not forecasts. Those are actual physical model runs, or not physical, but digital model runs. And so that's the tools, some of the tools that we use to figure out where it's going to go. Now, let's talk a little bit about the ensemble. So people like spaghetti plots, right, guys? They love to see the spaghetti plots. Well, look at that one.
True.
That is a ton of spaghetti right there. That is multiple runs of the European in white and multiple runs of the GFS in yellow. Now, instead of just showing you one run like we just did, right? This shows you overall, though, what the models are thinking. And so, you can see the white here, and you see it getting really close to the Carolinas. But you also notice that the white extends all the way over to here as well. So the main run that came out, that was one of the ones that's kind of on the left side of this envelope here. But you can see that there's still other model runs of the European that are not that far out to the west, okay? Obviously, the GFS is basically back up closer to it, and you can see that that is going to continue to hug Bermuda, it looks like. Now, let's talk about intensification, because that's probably the hardest. Literally finding out where it's going to go, or forecasting where it's going to go, is easier than forecasting what it's going to look like when it gets there. Notice that warm water. This is what we've been talking about all week. It's been riding out here over this blue area, which is sub 80 degree Fahrenheit water. It's about 78 degrees. Hurricanes, they need 80 plus degree water. So now it's right here, okay, and it's look at it, it's getting into that warmer water. And then look at the forecast. Boom, 85, 110, 115, 120. And it still has to go over this warm patch of water right here. And there's not a lot of shear up there either. In fact, shear is something that we look for to see as it's making that turn. Is it, a lot of times it's being picked up and blown by something, and that puts shear onto the storm and makes it lopsided, and it's not as organized, and it can lose a lot of energy. But if you look now, this is the Monday the 18th. The shear you're seeing, these colors, this is mainly associated with the storm itself. That is not shear like you're seeing up here. If it ran into this, it would have a hard time. It's not doing that. This environment between the Bahamas and up towards the Carolinas and Bermuda here in the Carolinas, that is all shear from the storm. So look at it, it got even stronger, and that's the reason why it's doing that. It is not seeing a lot of wind shear until it will get up into here, and that's when it's heading its way out. So intensity forecast is one of the hardest things. The Hurricane Center, it's kind of flat when they look at their improvement. They're getting a little bit better on it. AI models really might not help us out. That might be a good thing. But where it goes, that forecast from the Hurricane Center generally gets better and better and better. So you can see that shear is moving on out to the north and the east. Remember, we've been talking about that rip current risk. This is the actual swell, right? And you can see the swell will really get started, I think, late Sunday night into Monday for just about everybody, from Florida all the way up through the Carolinas, and really even to the Delmarva, so Ocean City, Maryland, the Jersey Shore, especially Monday and Tuesday for them. But remember, Efren, you guys back in school? I know North Carolina, I think it's the 25th or so. South Carolina gone back to school yet?
Yeah, the majority of the kids actually started going back to school about 2 weeks ago. Oh. And then last week, now all the kids are in session. So everybody's in, and really for the entire state. So we're looking at everybody who's not going to the beach anymore, but they're actually going in. We have one area, which is all the way up in Myrtle Beach, lucky them. that they don't have to go to school until next week. So one out of the county, someone still gets to enjoy beach weather for the weekend. But of course, the question is, the weekend may be good for the East Coast of Florida and the Carolinas, but after that, how much downhill is it going to go?
Yeah, the big risk is going to be those rip currents, because I'm a surfer guy, and I see those wave heights and I go, yeah, that's going to be great. In fact, I see some waves that are going to be too large that a lot of the beach breaks can't handle the waves, which means the waves, instead of breaking a little bit here, and you can ride the wave down the side, it's just going to break full. That's because the waves get too big. The other side of that, though, is the rip currents. When those waves are big, they push a lot of water up against the beach, right? When that water tries to flow back out, it gets stuck on those sandbars that the waves are actually breaking on. And then what it does is it tries to find a break in those sandbars, and if it does, it puts a current of water going straight out from shore through that sandbar, and people get stuck in that, and it's taking them straight away from the water, from the land, straight away from land. They look back and the beach is going the other way, right? And in the instinct, they just turn and swim straight for the beach. You're literally swimming against a current. You're not going to be able to do that. So what we want people to do, instead of swim straight back towards the beach, essentially what you want to do is, because the current's going this way, you're going to want to swim sideways and then get out of the current, then you come back into the beach. All right, so that is going to be a big threat as we get into all of next week. Again, I think it starts Sunday night, but it goes through, well, watch this. This is all the way through Friday, and you can see the swell is starting to come down a little bit across the southeast coast. So it's definitely Sunday night through Thursday for the southeast, and it will linger a little bit more for North Carolina and points to the north and the east. All right, Efren, Invest 98L.
Well, and Bobby, I want to add.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was just going to add, I think another piece of the rip currents, right, and just the overall, rough surf and rough waves, is that because we're on the west side of the storm, as Efren mentioned earlier, there's a decent amount of dry air there, right? So we're going to have some sinking air, some subsidence on the western side or the back side of the storm. So actual weather-wise, for most folks who are not at the beach, it might actually look like a pretty nice day, right? Yeah. We're talking fairly sunny skies. It's going to be a little bit breezy out there, of course, but not necessarily looking as stormy as you would typically expect with a tropical storm or hurricane. So I think that's, the other thing to keep in mind, that folks might be lulled into thinking, oh, it's a really nice beach day, whereas in reality, it's probably going to be one of the most dangerous beach days that, most folks have seen up and down the eastern seaboard here to date so far this summer. So I think that's maybe just another added point in the whole mix of the forecast as we look ahead to next week.
And great point, too, because you're absolutely right, Ross. This is the first time we've seen the swell like this big. We actually had one last few days, but nothing like what this potential storm can do. And keep in mind, folks, if you're at home, the bigger you see this storm get, the more swell it's going to generate. Swell is generated by wind, how much wind, how long the wind is blowing, and how much of what's called a fetch, but how much of the ocean's surface is it blowing on. The higher each one of those numbers go, the more waves you get and the more swell you can get from it. So that can cause the issue. All right, now let's, we can't leave 98 out. I feel bad, but Efren, you can get us, give it a little bit of love.
Well, we have to mention it because, it is an invest. It's being investigated as an area of low pressure, number 98 so far for the season. And it's not even in the Gulf. It's actually right on the Yucatan Peninsula. And right now, 25-mile-an-hour winds. So the center of the circulation of the thunderstorms is still on land. It's moving rather quickly, especially where it is on the Yucatan, to the west-northwest at about 17 miles an hour. Now, it's really nothing right now. It's a disorganized cluster of thunderstorms, but the forecast models have it in which it's going to eventually, within the next 2 to 3 days, probably up to 7 days, start moving its way into the Bay of Campeche. And in the extreme southern portions of the Gulf, the water is warm, but it gets a lot warmer when it gets into areas offshore of Texas and Louisiana. But the computer models are indicating, the European model, that it's not very organized. Now, it looks as far as an impressive tropical cyclone, but it's really not going to amount to much, at least by the European model, going into really Friday and into Saturday as it makes its way towards the southern Texas coastline. Is this going to, is it going to actually form into a tropical cyclone, even as a tropical depression? most of the guidance models, especially looking at the European, really doesn't give that much of a chance, but it's still an area of low pressure that'll move along the coast. So at least with those models, it's indicating that it could produce a fair amount of rainfall, but its progression, especially as fast as the European model is indicating it, that in a 5-day span from the time it's actually setting in the southern Gulf all the way until it makes it onshore into southern, southeastern Texas coastline, it's not going to get a chance to form, but as an area of low pressure, as it comes onshore, it'll give a chance for rain, but right now it doesn't look like it's depicting a lot of rain.
Yeah, this is one to watch for more of a nuisance than anything else, Efron, because that's going to end up, I think it could probably put down a little bit more rain than what the forecast model is saying right now, especially if you get one of those big convective cells to move over top of it. So we just don't know exactly what it's going to look like between now and then. So if you're in southeast Texas, you definitely need to watch it. I'd say from Brownsville, really, all the way up to Houston, because a lot of the convection today has been mainly to the
even though
north
it may
of the
not
center.
actually create itself,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to produce rainfall. Question is how much rainfall, how fast it's going to be moving, what interactions it's going to have from pretty much the Permian Basin all the way up to the Red River, progressing southerly. Now, it's summertime. Usually we'll have some kind of gigantic ridge like we have now that meanders from the Four Corners all the way across the southern plains into the Tennessee Valley. If we have one of those and the progression of the low kind of gets stunt, yeah, we could easily see a lot of rainfall.
Yeah. So definitely something to watch there. It's just like showing those surface winds for the GFS and the European. They're just model runs. And so you give people the idea of what's possible out there, but it doesn't mean that's exactly what's going to happen. Those are not forecasts. Now, the Hurricane Center says about a 20% chance that it develops. The first name on not the first, but the next name on the list is Fernand. So if we get there, it would be Ferdinand, but we'll see what happens. Again, only about a 20% chance. Gabrielle is up next after that, Umberta, Imelda, Jerry, and then everybody's favorite, Karen. And we know Karen's not going to come in and sit down and be quiet.
Gotta love it.
Right? So
That's going to be a nasty storm if we get her.
I can just imagine the jokes that have come out of that.
yeah, I mean, the problem is, and now we're just kind of talking off the cuff here, guys, but like, I remember Isaac. Remember Isaac was out there, and so you got pictures of Isaac from the Love Boat.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I find that I like that, but I don't put that on social media unless it's a complete fish storm, which is just affecting maritime issues. Because if it's a good enough storm, it's going to hurt somebody. And I let all the people on the internet make those jokes. It's great. There's going to be plenty of them. I'm not saying that they're wrong, but excuse me, it's just not necessarily up to me to be doing that with the position that we're in. It's kind of a little bit knowing that it's going to be bad. That's that thing. Today, what were you doing 21 years ago today? Anybody remember? Ross, you were 10, so that's okay. You don't need to know.
Let's see.
Hurricane.
I was going to say, I don't want to answer that question.
Hurricane Charlie made landfall in Punta Gorda
Charlie.
21 years ago today. And then the next day, tomorrow, I was up in New Bern, North Carolina. We were doing a cystic fibrosis telethon. Remember those things, telethons, right? And we did half of it inside, and the other half I went out and covered the hurricane coming through because it skipped over the Atlantic, came through us. That was a storm that was headed for Tampa. And then it went down, and instead it turned right a little bit sooner, and it hit Punta Gorda. In fact, everybody left Tampa to go to Orlando to get away from it. But it had turned and went into Punta Gorda and then went up to Orlando, so they got to see it all. But I say that because, you're happy that it missed Tampa. But then you go and you look and saw what it did to Punta Gorda, and there's a 5-mile stretch. It was a small storm, but there's about a 5 to 8 mile stretch of Punta Gorda. When one of the first stories I did when I came down here was cover the 5-year reunion of that, 5-year anniversary of that. And you could go into town and clearly see all the new construction, right? And like, oh, well, here's where the core hit. So it's kind of hard when you don't want it to hit you, but you don't want to hit anybody else either.
That's the hard part about a lot of these stories. Yeah, if you recall, and this is historically really for all of South Carolina, but in 2015, towards the end of September, Hurricane Joaquin was a monster of a storm. Yeah. But it was making its way towards the Bahamas, and then it started to make its northerly turn. And by the end of September, going to the beginning of October, all the model guidance showed that it was going to be fish food. It was just going to stay out, maybe skirt the areas around Bermuda, but it was not going to make landfall anywhere in the U.S. And you saw all the Joaquin little memes that were all over it, and everyone's like, okay, it's a joke. The irony behind that is because of its influence over 500 miles away from the Florida and Georgia Carolina coast, we had a cutoff flow that parked itself right over right over the southern Appalachians and produced historic rainfall in South Carolina. In fact, I was here back in 2015 when we had that in early October, and in all the years that I'd done research, you mentioned Isaac. I remember when we had the radar deployment for Hurricane Isaac back in 2012, brought right over Houma, Louisiana. But the amount of rainfall that these tropical complexes do, and mind you, Joaquin was 500 miles away.
Wow.
But I remind myself of back in, I think it was 2013 or 2012 when we had Tropical Storm Debbie that dropped a ton of rainfall over central and northern Florida. And it was just a tropical storm. And that's the big thing that we have now, that these tropical storms may not be, it's not a hurricane, but they are producing an incredible amount of rainfall.
Yeah, a lot of moisture to work with. We put 20 inches, 21 in some spots in Sarasota County with Debbie last year when it came through. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Ross, Efren, you got one last thing before we let everybody go here tonight? A little tip for the season?
I just want to know what it's like for you to have twin fins out in the surf.
I think just stay. Yeah, I would just stay weather aware, and now's the time to do any prep work that you need to do before any potential storm does make its way towards you, if it does. So you got some time left to make your preps.
That's right. Hopefully this thing recurves. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Most of us will be back. Efren, we'll see you on Friday night, right?